For centuries, the greatest minds have argued over the nature of the good, the properties of the soul, and the fabric of the universe. But what if those debates aren't profound? What if they're completely meaningless? We are not going to answer metaphysical questions. Instead, we are going to build a machine to identify them. Our objective is to map the exact boundary where meaningful statements end and senseless noise begins. This demarcation project belongs to Ludwig Wittgenstein. In his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, he made a ruthless assertion: the limits of our language mean the limits of our world. As Bertrand Russell recognized, the traditional problems of philosophy aren't mysteries of the universe. They are mechanical errors. They arise from an ignorance of how symbolism works and the physical misuse of language itself. Philosophy, then, is not a body of doctrine trying to discover new facts about reality. It is a rigorous, surgical activity designed to cure our intelligence of linguistic bewitchment. To understand how language hooks onto reality, Wittgenstein starts with an ontological foundation. The world is not a collection of isolated things, it is the totality of facts. At the absolute bottom of this system are simple objects. These form the indestructible substance of the world. But an isolated object tells us nothing. An object only matters based on how it can physically and logically combine with others. Combining simple objects forms an atomic fact, a specific configuration in logical space. Language mirrors this reality. Words draw precise projection lines to each corresponding object. A perfect map is true. If the physical configuration doesn't exist, the lines break, rendering it false. But whether true or false, the core requirement remains. A statement only makes sense if its internal architecture flawlessly mirrors a physical configuration in reality. This leads to Wittgenstein's picture theory of meaning. A proposition is quite literally a model of reality. We construct situations in language by way of experiment. Think of a piece on a chessboard. Knowing the physical shape of this king is useless without the geometric rules governing how it moves. In the same way, knowing a word is useless without understanding its logical syntax. Precise grammatical syntax acts exactly like spatial coordinates. When you string words together, the grammar determines their exact position in logical space. We can trace this back to the literal roots of writing. Alphabetic script evolved directly from pure pictorial representation, like these hieroglyphs, and it never lost that essential depicting function. This is why you can hear a completely new sentence and understand it instantly, without having it explained. You don't need a dictionary for every combination of words. You intuitively calculate the geometric projection they form. Language is not a loose collection of labels attached to things. It is a strict mathematical projection. But there is an obvious objection. A printed sentence on a page doesn't look anything like the physical event it describes, so how can we call it a picture? Wittgenstein solves this with the concept of structural isomorphism. Consider the gramophone record. Look at these three representations: an orchestra's acoustic sound wave, a printed musical score, and the physical grooves on a record. To the eye, they appear completely different. Yet despite their physical differences, they all share an identical, unalterable internal mathematical structure. Because their logical architecture matches exactly, one can be perfectly translated into another. Meaning does not come from superficial physical resemblance. It is derived entirely from this invisible, shared logical structure. Because meaning relies on this strict mapping, the system is rigidly binary. A proposition must restrict reality to exactly two alternatives: yes or no. This animation shows a binary truth table. A valid proposition clearly divides logical space into true and false, outlining the specific conditions under which the statement is verified against reality. Now contrast that with a traditional metaphysical statement. Take a phrase like, "the good is more identical than the beautiful." When we feed this into our syntax parsing algorithm, it searches for atomic reference for the good and finds none. The terms lack physical coordinates. The proposition immediately disconnects from the grid. These disconnected statements are not false, they are simply senseless. Wittgenstein calls them idling engines, gears spinning wildly without ever engaging the physical transmission of reality. Philosophers spend their careers trying to answer questions that are structurally impossible to process within the machinery of human language. This brings us to the ultimate boundary condition of the Tractatus, the rigid demarcation between what can be said and what can only be shown. The logical form that allows language to picture reality cannot itself be pictured. We cannot use language to state its own foundational rules, because any statement would already rely on those rules to make sense. This diagram represents a geometric field of vision. It shows why a system cannot observe its exterior limits. While the eye perceives everything within the visual field, the eye itself cannot be seen. The origin point is excluded. Logic fills the world. We cannot step outside of logic to describe its outer boundary. That boundary can only be shown through the application of language. It can never be said. This leaves us with Wittgenstein's concept of the mystical. He is not referring to the supernatural. The mystical is simply the profound, inexpressible feeling of the world as a bounded whole. Because ethics, aesthetics, and the overarching meaning of life reside at this exact boundary, they cannot be broken down into atomic acts. They are strictly immune to logical language, which leads to the final deliberate contradiction of his work. The purpose of the Tractatus is for the reader to eventually recognize that all of its own complex logical propositions are actually nonsensical. They are just temporary tools used to achieve clarity. The philosopher must use these propositions as a ladder to climb to a higher perspective. But once he reaches the top, he must throw away the ladder after he has climbed up it. Only then will he see the world aright. True philosophical clarity requires accepting the hard limits of logic. It culminates in a single realization: what we cannot speak about, we must pass over in silence.